Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I wanted to talk a little bit about this documentary that I saw recently on China, the wrestler, the Ninth Wonder of the World, aka Joni Lauer. Um, and what I thought of it, what I think about China in general. Um, I was a wrestler. I was heavily watching wrestling when China bursted onto the scene in 1997. And I remember the episode of Raw where she debuted. It was the German episode of Raw. The Raw they were in Germany, and suddenly somebody just grabs Marlena out of the audience and starts ragdolling Marlena. So, Triple H and Goldust were in a feud at that time, and when China first came out, she had the really strong jaw, she had the really big muscles, and she had the really big physique, and you were like, damn, China is a man. You know what I mean? Like that's, of course, that's politically incorrect. Now we wouldn't say that. We would use a term like she's the trans woman, she's this, she's that. But in those days, in the world of professional wrestling, if you saw somebody like that, it was like, damn, China's like a man. So she was a very different type of wrestler because they had other types of wrestlers before that were women. Sable, Marlena, Sunny, Miss Elizabeth, Sherry, Moolah, a whole bunch. But they never had a woman that was this imposing. And then she became Triple H's bodyguard. And then later in that year, in 1997, um, DX formed. It was a tag team match, Undertaker and Mankind versus Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and that's when DX formed. Rick Rude came back as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard, and China Kit was, of course, the bodyguard of Triple H. Um, and as they were in DX, of course, they did a lot of antics. They did a lot of stuff, especially after Shawn Michaels lost the WWF Championship to Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14. And then X Pac comes back to the WWE, and the New Age Outlaws joined DX the night after WrestleMania 14, and they formed the DX Army. And it was at that time that all the jokes with about China came to be, because she would come back with a different surgery each time. Like one day she had a jaw reduction, next day she had a breast augmentation, and they would joke about it. DX would joke about it, especially as DX became um, the summer of 1998, DX became baby faces. They became good guys. So um, that's what this documentary goes into. It also goes into a little bit of the early life of China before she was a wrestler. And, a lot of her insecurities, being sexually molested by a family member, being raped in college, and body insecurities that was being made fun of, and that's why she became a bodybuilder at first, and that's why she went to Killer Kowalski School, where she met Triple H, who of course got her into the business. But um, it starts to talk a little bit about the dark side of it, and of course this is Dark Side of the Ring, so um, they are going to talk about the dark side of it. And part of the dark side with China is, of course, the drug use. Um, it's funny because it's similar to Sunny. Like Sunny didn't use drugs before she came into the wrestling business, and then being associated with Shawn Michaels and being associated with that whole scene in wrestling caused her to use drugs. Same thing with China. China didn't use drugs when she first got into wrestling, other than probably steroids, because she was in the bodybuilding world. Other than steroids, she didn't really use drugs. She was clean, and she was with Triple H, and Triple H um, is notoriously clean. He was the only member of the clique that was clean, didn't drink, didn't do drugs. Um, but as she gets deeper and deeper into it, she starts to be on these antidepressant medications. Because one thing about her is that, kind of like what I talked about before, the other video with Paris and Michael Jackson, where she was a very shy person. You know what I mean? Like, she didn't really do good interviews in wrestling because she was so, like always say, you got to play off the crowd. You know, she didn't do really good interviews in wrestling because she was so shy. You know what I mean? So her shyness didn't really translate well to wrestling. But then again, when she was in wrestling, she didn't really need to do a lot of interviews. All she needed to do was really beat up the men, punch them in the balls, and that would be it. But see, she wanted to get into the ring and become a wrestler and become a champion wrestler. And that is a problem, because at that time in the wrestling business, you did not have women wrestling men. And the problem was that Chyna couldn't really wrestle a lot of the women because she was so large. So wrestling some of the girls like Ivory, like Jacqueline, well, Jacqueline was pretty big. Ivory or Molly Holly or um, Trish Stratus or Lita at that time that were in WWF at that time, you couldn't really do that because um, uh, it wouldn't look believable if she was beating up all these girls. But then again, it wouldn't look believable if she was beating up the men either. And they had this angle when Vince Russo was booking for WWF in 1999, where she was gonna be Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF Championship. This was the one where they kept changing it around and around. This was the one where Jesse Ventura was the governor of Minnesota at the time, and his state where he was serving, he didn't even want him to be involved with wrestling because he's in politics, and they felt like it was beneath him. But wrestling was his former career, so he figured he'd do this shot as a as a as a favor, I guess, to Vince McMahon, even though him and Vince have never really seen eye to eye. But anyway, and this is the one where they kept changing it. First, it was supposed to be just Triple H and Stone Cold. Then it was supposed to be just Triple H and Mankind. Then it was supposed to be Chyna was going to be in the match. And finally, it ended in Mankind, Triple H, and Stone Cold Steve Austin in a triple threat match. And uh, they were going to put literally the belt on Chyna, the World Wrestling Federation Championship belt. It didn't happen, but they did put the Intercontinental Championship on this. Now on her in a quote unquote good housekeeping match with Jeff Jarrett in 1999. The anger of this so angered Jeff Jarrett that he walked out of the company, and he went and when Vince Russo left to go to WCW, he also left to go to WCW because he didn't want to lose to a woman. I mean, we know that wrestling is not real, okay? But you has to maintain a certain level of reality based. Otherwise, it's anyway, Chyna wins the Intercontinental Championship in 1999. She makes history as being the first and only woman to ever do that. It was around this time though that after she lost the title to Chris Jericho, that her personal life takes a dive. Her and Triple H came into the WWF together. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. They were trained at the same wrestling school and all that. And then she discovers love notes between Stephanie McMahon, who his on-screen wife on TV is Stephanie McMahon. They did the angle with Stephanie McMahon turns on her father Vince, and she becomes a heel, and she on screen marries Triple H, even after Triple H initially tricked her by drugging her and taking her to a chapel and getting her married without her even knowing. The paper that next Sunday at Armageddon, I think it was Armageddon 1999, she turns on her dad and and joins up with Triple H and becomes a heel. And you had the McMahon Helmsley era, especially after Vince McMahon turned on The Rock in WrestleMania 16. So you have Triple H and Stephanie working together as a married couple on screen, spending a lot of time together. And like what happened with Chris Benoit and Nancy Sullivan in '96, art imitates life, and eventually Stephanie McMahon uh, begins to fall in love with Triple H when he is still with Chyna. So he cheats on Chyna with Stephanie McMahon, and this hits as a blow to Chyna's self-esteem because Chyna had, like I mentioned in the beginning, she had low self-esteem. She looked like a quote unquote man, right? In the beginning. And people called her a man in the beginning. And when Triple H cheated, you know, that caused her to say, you know what? Maybe I'm not pretty enough. Maybe I'm not attractive enough to keep this man. And then on top of that, they fired her because I guess Stephanie McMahon felt threatened by having Triple H's ex fiance around, and she was blacklisted from WWE. She one of the only performers, um, big performers in WWE history to never come back to the company. The other is Randy Savage. Ironically enough, they're both associated with uh, something to do with Stephanie McMahon, but she never comes back. And she finds the love letters, between Triple H and Stephanie that were written way before she discovered about the cheating. And then um, Stephanie goes into the bathroom, and it is basically like, well, sorry, Joni, I'm with Hunter now, and he's my man, and I love him, and I'm going to get married to him. And it just really broke Chyna's heart, and Chyna never really got over it. After that, she got deeper into the drugs. She she started off doing Playboy with WWE, but after that, she got so into the porn industry, because that was her only source of income. Because no other wrestling company would or could hire her because at the time when she got fired, WCW and ECW were 2 years away from actually going out of business. So they weren't in a position to hire her. TNA wasn't going to touch her, especially when she became a real big mess, even though they did bring her back like in 2010. So she becomes an English teacher in Japan. She's doing pretty good there. She tries to get her life clean. She converts to Mormonism, the Mormon religion, her Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She tries to get herself clean there, but just nothing. She's still, um, she's still holding on. She was still holding on for many years to the past, to what had been done to her by Triple H, and not only by Triple H, but by other people. Because then, and the documentary touches on this. She begins a relationship with X Pac, and the relationship with X Pac is even more toxic than the relationship with Triple H. What's crazy to me though is like I mean, X Pac, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Your your ex boyfriend's best friend. Like, I would think for X Pac something like that would be off limits. But anyway, her and X Pac, like in the late 2000s, they released this sex tape, "A Night in China," and that really kicks off her porn career. Her porn career, and yeah, you know, and then she was on a Surreal Life with Debrat and Mini Me, and you could tell that X Pac was showing up at the house and shit. And he was controlling, and it was rumors that he was, he was very abusive. He used to beat her up and shit. Used to put her down and stuff. And they were on crystal meth and amphetamine together. Life was really bad for her. But again, after she left him, she went to Japan. She became an English teacher, and she was doing pretty good. But was one producer started to convince her to come back to the United States like around 2014, 2015. And once she came back to the United States, um, she fell right back into depression, especially after um, Triple H was on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast in 2015, and they asked him, "Will China ever be in the Hall of Fame?" And he said no. He said because if someone Googles her name and then they see that she was a porn star, we in the WWE can't be associated with something like that. So even though China made history, and I made a video about this when it first was a thing, not when it first was a thing, but like 2016 or so, my old channel. Um, and I said actually defended the WWE of their decision not to include her in the Hall of Fame. But now that I've grown older and I've seen that that's kind of bullshit, like a publicly traded company, but you got Mike Tyson in the Hall of Fame, you got Trump in the Hall of Fame, you got Jimmy Snuka in the Hall of Fame. Trump's a liar and a cheater and possibly used political machinations to get into office as president. Mike Tyson is a convicted rapist and Jimmy Snuka is a murderer. You know what I mean? So having having Chyna in the Hall of Fame, who's a porn star, doesn't. It's no excuse not to have her in there. You know what I mean? It's just a personal axe to grind because of the relationship she has with Stephanie and Triple H. Um, s- you know, long story short, she doesn't get into the Hall of Fame. She gets deeper into drugs, and she has this interview. I think it's on 2015, around the time when this podcast came out with Vince Russo. And Vince Russo, you could tell that Vince Russo was really a friend of China because he was the writer, he was the creative impetus behind pushing China in the late 90s by making her the star that she was. And you could tell during this interview that she was high, she was out of it, she wasn't really coherent. She was dissing Triple H, she was calling him Diddy, calling him Puffy, calling him Felicia, all that shit. Wasn't coherent at all. And it wasn't too long after that she passed away of a drug overdose. And it was sad because, like her friend Anna Nicole Smith, you knew that she was headed down that road. You know what I mean? Like, it's so many people in wrestling, and she's one of them, that we would make jokes of, again, just like with DMX, like I said about in my DMX video, we would make jokes about these people, these celebrities. Oh, they're on the drugs, drugs and stuff, and then that was the butt of the joke when you would mention certain celebrities, like you would mention Scott Hall. Oh, he's on drugs, right? Jake the Snake Roberts, China was one of them. DMX was one of them. Carrie Fish. Carrie Fisher from Star Wars. Uh, she was one of them. Sorry, guys, I disappeared. But Carrie Fisher from Star Wars was one of them. And like Whitney Houston, Britney Spears. Well, I mentioned this in a lot of videos. So Chyna was one of these celebrities that whenever you heard their names, you always kind of laughed or grimaced because you knew they were associated with drug use. Like that was the thing yesterday with yesterday's video, where I thought it was different. Like Michael Jackson was never associated with drugs, so his death was a shock. But with Chyna, she was associated with drugs. It was the butt of the joke many times within her fan base and within the wrestling fan base that she was a drug addict. You know what I mean? And um, her childhood trauma, never getting over it, being teased, being picked on, and the stuff she went through in the wrestling business contributed to what happened to her. Just like all these other people, like Carrie Fisher, like DMX, like um, Scott Hall, Jake the Snake Roberts, people that do heavy drugs, right? Notorious in the spotlight, are suffering something much, much more deeper. Kind of like the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior was one of those people. But with Ultimate Warrior, it was kind of like it was with Michael Jackson, where he was didn't really know that he was a drug, well, steroid, but you didn't really know that he was kind of using other drugs. But yeah, in China, and then in 2016, the same day as Prince, she passes away, and then in 2019, posthumously, she gets inducted into the Hall of Fame as a part of DX. But I wonder if she'll ever be inducted into the Hall of Fame as herself. I mean, she accomplished much more than just being a part of DX. I mean, she was the ninth wonder of the world. They gave it a ninth wonder of the world because Andre the Giant was eighth wonder of the world. You know what I mean? So she was kind of like Andre the Giant of her era. But this documentary really made me feel sorry for her. And it made me think, like, if she was still alive today, like she says in the documentary, would she be Wonder Woman instead of Gal Gadot? She was perfect for that. I just wish she would have gotten her life together and somebody would have reached out and helped her, you know, like and gotten her the help that she needed. Like if there was a DDP, like with these. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click that bell button. See when my next video is coming out.